In our culture, it seems like we have raised cognitions or thoughts to be the most important thing. And somewhere along the way, in our adolescent years often, we start to really hold on to our thoughts as if they were as real as this table sitting in front of you. And it can be such a shock when you realise that your thoughts are a passing parade. And hey, guess what? You can have a thought and you don't need to do anything about it.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello there. It is so good to be back with you for another episode of the podcast. It's my pleasure to introduce you today to a wonderful guest, a guest whose work I've followed for many, many years. It's the lovely Louise Hayes that I'll be having the privilege of talking to today. You guys will know how passionate I am about acceptance and commitment therapy, and so it will come as no surprise that I've followed Louise's work, and I'm really excited to bring Louise's wisdom and warmth and generosity and expertise to you today. Louise is a world leader in acceptance and commitment therapy training. She's also a clinician and an author. She's a PhD and clinical psychologist, and she's devoting her time at the moment to really supporting professionals and writing and disseminating really powerful information to support the wider community. She operates a charity in Nepal to support underprivileged children. And she is somebody who I know we're all going to learn a lot from. She also has a new book, very exciting, a book coming out in July called What Makes You Stronger. And we can pre-order that as well through the website, but I'll share more details about that a little towards the end of the episode. So Louise, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Jodi, and what a lovely invitation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's just such a joy to be able to talk with you. What brought you to acceptance and commitment therapy, if you can take your mind back to where it all began?
Oh, I can. And it's funny, when you were doing the introduction, what I was thinking, given the subject of this podcast, that you should have had in the bio, and she has anxiety.
Ah! Welcome to the club. You're one of us.
Exactly. And there are many of us in the club. And so to your question, what brought me to acceptance and commitment therapy is when I was first training as a psychologist, I was really fortunate to happen to hear people talking about Steve Hayes. And Steve Hayes is the founder of acceptance and commitment therapy and a really brilliant psychologist. And I might add, he's not my dad, as some people think.
No relation.
Or anything like that. We're friends, and we're friends now. And I happened to hear about this work. And, it's funny, in my training, learning to be a psychologist, my understanding of how to be a good psychologist way back then, before ACT, was that you really had to make sure that you have dealt with all of your own personal issues. And there was a sense that if you have anxiety, or if you're a bit of an anxious person, you should have gotten rid of that and dealt with it, like deal with it, and perhaps my lecturers in my academic and clinical training didn't intend that to be the case, but I know that that's what I understood, and I know a lot of my fellow trainees understood it like that. And of course, it's impossible to do. You can't deal with it. There's no packing it away and going, this is done, I'm over it. But what you can do is learn how to open up to it and understand it. And so I went along to a training with Steve, and I watched this guy he now has more than 700 publications and is in the top 3 psychologists in the world. And I watched him talking about his own panic disorder. And I was like, oh, wow. this is not, and when he started to talk about that this is normal, that anxiety is part of the human condition, and didn't present as just this, person who had it all together and had everything perfectly, it completely changed my life. Completely. And it changed my work. And I'm lucky enough to have spent the last 20 years on that ride with lots and lots of people realizing that a lot of the things that we think are broken inside us are actually part of being human. And if we open up to that and talk about it, we make everybody stronger.
We really do. And I think you have absolutely touched on something that I know I've personally related to. And ACT is what really helped me to identify the fact that I am not broken. It's understanding, isn't it, the way we operate, and to know that you're not. I think one of the things that we can do is we can feel quite alone and feel as though, well, I think everyone else is sorting this out. What's wrong with me? And it's really beautiful that you're able to share openly about your own experience, and it just adds to the connection that we can have with each other as people, but also with the way that we can work to help each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think part of the trick is that we all look so good on the outside.
Yes. Mm.
You're sitting there talking to me. You look completely gorgeous today, Jodi, right? And when we walk down the street and we see our friends, or we go to parties, or whatever we do, go to work, everybody else looks great on the outside, and we just don't know what's going on the inside because our
Mm.
culture has said hide it and pretend that everything is okay.
And of course, social media plays a lot into that, doesn't it? Because we are really wired to compare ourselves. That's really part of our DNA, isn't it? That we are wired to compare. It's an evolutionary adaptation, I suppose, but it really does play havoc with our mental health and with the way that we struggle to understand that other people are going through a lot of different challenges at the same time as we are, because it just doesn't appear that way.
Exactly, exactly. And it doesn't appear that way because of our, uh, one big reason is our culture and the way we are taught um, to pack it all away and pretend that everything is okay. And that doesn't mean
Mm.
that the flip side is that we should, let everyone see everything and fall apart. Um, but being able to connect as humans and understanding that, 1 in 5 people have anxiety, and that we all have struggles. It's part of life.
It is. It's so true. And one of the ways that I love that you talked about your own anxiety, which was obviously a struggle for you, and it'd be interesting to learn how you apply ACT to your own anxiety as well as how you support others. But when you talk about opening up to anxiety, can you talk a little bit more about that for our listeners today?
Of course, of course. Well, we've already been opening up by acknowledging that it's part of our humanity. And so,
Mm.
um, so I think there's opening up in a couple of different ways. One of the ways we might think about it is just inside ourselves, privately, not with anyone else, but just with ourselves. Being able to be aware of how your body is on the day, understanding if your heart is racing or if you have a little bit of nerves, like I've got a little bit of nerves now.
Mm.
Being able to tune into that and allow it to be there. That sounds like a really hard thing to do, but it's actually something that you can practice. And when you put down the fight and realize that inside you is just a message that there is something going on in your world, perhaps something new or something more challenging, or something going on with your thoughts and emotions that is triggering that. That there's we can let go of the fight.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that we like it. No one likes it. But when you understand a couple of really important things, like anxiety is necessary at some level. Of course, not chronic level, but at some level anxiety is necessary because it helps us read the world, helps us survive, helps us look out for danger. And the two biggest dangers for humans are physical danger, like will I have enough food? Will I have a roof to live over my head? Can I pay the bills? And social danger. Will I have people to look after me? Do people love me and care about me? And they're the two biggest risks for humans. So our mind and body is always going to be on the lookout for those things. And so when I say opening up, I mean acknowledging that the feelings of anxiety that you have are part of that very need that we have. And so that first part of being able to be aware of what's going on inside us can be really helpful, and putting down the fight that we need to get rid of it. Understanding that we can continue to do what we care about. And that this is the thing that I really love the most. When you do what you care about, your anxiety is easier to carry. So that's the part about opening up. Doesn't make it go away, but it can make it easier to carry.
Yes. And it's such a revelation. I think it's a common approach, isn't it, to wait and to say, I'll do this when I feel better, when I feel more relaxed, when I don't have the doubts, when I don't have the worries and all the what if questions and all of these feelings that come with anxiety in our body. But the idea, and that was something that really captured me as well and was such a pivotal point in my life, to go, you don't have to wait. And goodness, I think we'd all be waiting forever, especially if we're doing big things that are important to us and that require a little bit of courage and getting out of that comfort zone. It's so powerful. And I loved what you said about when we are doing what is important to us, it's easier to carry. I love that you said that. I believe that, and I've experienced that myself.
Yeah. And it's a really hard thing to, like, people who are listening might hear it and think, yeah, I don't know how to do that. It's easy to hear it, but stepping into a place of doing it, that's where the learning happens. So it's small steps and the experience of trying something that makes you feel a bit nervous or feel anxious, but trying it with a sense of being willing to have that anxiety because there's something there that you care about. Okay, let me ask you a weird question, Jodi.
Okay.
If you don't get to be a stamp collector between now and the very end of your days, how will you feel about that?
I'll be A-okay with that.
You'll be A-okay with that. So what would you say your level of anxiety or distress around never getting to collect stamps between now and the end of your days is?
Pretty much zero.
Zero, right, okay. And so that's because you don't have any value around stamp collecting for you. Somebody else might, but for you, it's really not an important thing, right? Now, let me ask you something, just and you don't need to say exactly what it is, but if you think about something that's really important for you, something that you'd really like to do in the future, maybe something that's a little bit hard or something that's going to make you grow and be a bit challenging. And as you think about that thing, how much anxiety do you have around that thing?
An 8.
An 8, right. Okay.
Yes.
And so this is the thing about anxiety, right? We don't have anxiety about the things we don't care about. We only have anxiety about the things that we care about, right? So zero anxiety for you on stamp collecting because there's zero care factor, right? But as soon as you think about, this is something I want in my life, this is something I care about, your anxiety goes up. And so that means your anxiety is a message that there's something in there that you care about. Now, if you manage to get rid of the anxiety, then you just end up stamp collecting, with apologies to people who love stamp collecting, right? You just end up in a place where you're doing things you don't care about.
Yes.
And so being able to bring the whole idea that anxiety is a message, it tells you something, and it tells you there's something that you care about. And that means we don't want to fight the anxiety. We want to be able to hold it gently. do the
Mm.
things we care about, and learn how to carry it. Now, that does take some skill, you know. And if your anxiety is at a really high level and a long history of anxiety for any listeners, it takes some skill and some practice, and we don't want people to do it alone.
Mm.
But the central message is there are things you can do, and the thing you can't do is fight it and get rid of it.
Mm. Yeah, there's a great metaphor, the old drop the rope metaphor. Can you talk us through that a little bit in terms of the idea of fighting anxiety and how futile it is?
Yeah, that metaphor is one of the original ACT metaphors, and there's a few different ways to think about it. But one of the ways that is often described is to imagine that your anxiety is like a big monster, and you're constantly trying to kill this monster, beat it, make it go away, so that you can live your life, and this big anxiety monster is no longer following you around. And as long as you're trying to do that, as long as you're trying to make it go away, or push it over the edge of the cliff, or do whatever you want to try to do with this whole experience, is that you don't actually get to live life because you're busy fighting this thing. And so if you let go of the fight and just turn and do what the things that you care about, and bring your anxiety, let this anxiety monster follow along behind you, it gives you the opportunity to do the things you care about. Now, it makes it sound really easy, but of course there's a really important caveat there, and that is that it's not easy being followed around by a voice in your head saying, you're stupid, you'll never get this right, you can't do this, what if this goes wrong, what if this goes wrong? That doesn't make it easy. But I tell you, it's a damn sight easier doing the things you care about with anxiety than not doing the things you care about because you're anxious.
Isn't it just? And there's a lot of regret that will come with that towards the time of life where one realises that maybe that ship has sailed and those opportunities have passed you by. And that brings more challenge, more psychological struggle, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we know a lot about how to help people with anxiety. And people will require different levels of assistance and different levels of understanding. But I think we do know a lot about how to help each other and how to be together, and how professionals can help too.
Yeah.
And so one of the areas that I've spent most of my career working on is helping adolescents, or helping the parents of adolescents too. And we are in such a tricky place with the pandemic, and with anxiety really high, and understandably high. And so these messages that we're talking about being able to understand what anxiety is, being able to have some tools and some skills to help ourselves, the most valuable thing we can give the next generation is those same things. And we can't take it for granted that they'll just get it in school, or that they'll just acquire it.
No, that's one of the things that I dearly love to do, and I've got the joy of doing that next week. I get to speak to staff, and then I have 2 sessions with students, and I get to speak to parents. It'll be a beautifully enriching day for the people I get to work with, for me being able to share these skills and tools and insights. But you're right, it baffles me that at a fundamental level that in schools we're not taught, our children are not taught to understand these really foundational principles about mental health well-being and being able to live a really rich life. It's I can do my part, but the more people that are listening, the more people that are learning and spreading the word that there is a new way. It's not a new way. It's new to a lot of people.
30 years old, but still
Yes,
new.
that's it. That's it. It's an awareness for a lot of people that there's an approach that's probably quite different to other approaches that they may have learned about or heard about or worked with in their own therapy, with their own professional support. Could you share more about the skills that we learn in acceptance and commitment therapy and that are really helpful for being able to carry our anxiety with us as we move forward to do what really is important to us?
Yeah, of course I can. Of course I can. And so, funnily enough, the skills, they don't sound very hard. So first when I say them, I want to acknowledge that they don't sound hard, but sometimes the things that sound the easiest are actually the hardest to do.
Yes.
So in the new book that we have coming in July 2022, we have a framework that we call DNAV. And DNAV is a way of thinking about how to do ACT work in a fairly palatable, easy kind of way for everybody. The book is for lay people, not professionals. And so maybe I'll walk you through some of those parts. And I might start with so DNA is a metaphor that we use for thinking about the parts of us that we all have. We all know what DNA is. It's like, our cellular being. But we use DNA in a different kind of way. We use DNA as thinking about everybody has these abilities. And we're going to call them discoverer, noticer, and advisor. Okay. So everybody has these abilities. There's not a single listener who doesn't. And so part of what we do is think about how to use these abilities in ways that help us be guided and work towards what we care about, which is the V, value. Mm. And so maybe I'll walk you through those. And I'll start with A. I'll start backwards because that's an easier place. So A simply stands for the way that we give ourselves advice. Mm. And what we mean is the way we talk to ourselves in our head, the way we tell ourselves what we've done right and what we've done wrong. And of course, if you've got anxiety, that is just often such a loud piece of us. Like you just want to make that ability to talk to yourself just shut up for a minute. And so giving yourself advice and talking to yourself is a very powerful part of our humanity. It's also like a superpower. And it's astounding that this superpower of talking to yourself, telling yourself what you can do, what you should do, what you got wrong, what might go wrong, like that's the superpower we have as humans. And yet we don't really teach people how to use it. Right? So knowing how to use it can be things like understanding that when you tell yourself something or when you think something, when you have a thought like, I'm not as good as other people, that when you have a thought like that there are things that you can do with it rather than just blindly follow it. And I'll give you a clear example for the listeners. For example, if you have a thought like, I can't deliver a podcast, I can't talk on this podcast, that I can be having the thought, I can't talk on this podcast, even while I'm talking on the podcast.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I work with young teenagers, we have a bit of fun and we do things like I'll ask them to stand up and walk across the room while they're saying out loud, I can't walk across the room. And it's so interesting and so much fun to engage in this kind of way because they're astounded that they can do these two things simultaneously. That they can say, I can't walk across the room out loud while they're walking across the room. And that may sound silly, but think about how often you think something and follow it and obey it without pausing to think, maybe this is just something I've learned well, like an old, well-learned path I've been on.
Yes.
And so that's giving yourself advice, and there's lots of ways that we can help people be more flexible about it. It's thinking, talking to yourself, doing all those kind of things.
Yes.
The N part, so the N part is noticing. And noticing is being able to be aware of what goes on inside your body and outside your body. So it's using our senses, our feelings, our physiological awareness, being able to balance our inner being, like being able to calm ourselves, being able to use the messages that are inside our body. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when you have anxiety, your body can be a place of fear. You know, and we try to push down those feelings, try to push down our butterflies in our tummy, or try to get away from that stuff. And what I find the most interesting is if you look at the research on, let's say, feelings, for example, being able to bring our feelings into our awareness and allow them to be there is linked in lots of research to better outcomes. So what about if you were able to just take a breath and notice what was inside you and say, my chest is fluttering a bit, I think I'm a bit anxious. Now that makes it sound like super simple. But what about if it was consistent with the research that being able to do that very thing will help you with work, career, relationships, life? So this, and of course, noticing can get really deep and profound. We can sit in meditation. We can do a whole range of different things, but it can get much more complex. So that's noticing.
Yes.
And the ability we all have. And then the D part is discovering. And this is where we want to bring in the ability to notice whether our actions and what we do in the world are inside our comfort zone or stepping into the discover zone where things are new and different.
Yes. That's where life can be really enriched, can't it? Just at the edge of and into that new zone.
Totally. And yet the comfort zone, like by its very nature, it's comfortable in there. We all want to hang out there for a while.
Yes.
And stepping into a place that's new is scary. But here's a really interesting thing that I know is if you take that first small step, even a small step, like it's a really hard phenomena to describe. But even one step in the direction can actually set you on the path to something that you don't really probably have never thought about.
Yes. Yes. There's a beautiful quote that when you take the first step, you might not know what the next step was going to be after taking that, but you've got a different view. And so thinking of stepping on a stepping stone, once you're on the first one, you can see more. And I really love this. I really love this part of your DNAV model. So continue. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely thing to share. And so, firstly, there's nothing wrong with being in our comfort zone. You know, we all want to lay on the couch and drink a glass of wine and watch Netflix. That's perfectly okay.
Yes.
And it's about understanding the balance when we've been there too long, or when that's so safe that, or so comfortable that we're not growing and we're not trying anything new, even though we desire trying new things. And so what I think is interesting, and I don't think you can really get this until you've tried to do something or you've thought about something in your own life, an experience you've had where you've tried to do something, is it always feels hard in the beginning. And then when you take that first step, it can still feel hard. Doesn't mean it's easy when you take that first step. But once you've taken that first step, you can see where the second one goes. And if often I ask the people that I work with, my clients and the people that I work with in training, to think about something in your life that you love and what that was like when you first started it. Great
question.
Yeah. Have you got an example? Can you think of something in your life that you love that you're willing to share?
I can. It's I remember being in my 20s, so I'm talking about karate. I recently made the decision to stop doing karate. I got to a very high level and decided that I was really content with the journey and ready to close the chapter, and then I joined a basketball team. But when I was in my 20s, I remember I wanted to do a martial art. I didn't know which. There was a lot of indecision, and in hindsight, there was so much anxiety around it. It felt like a very male-dominated space. I didn't know anyone that did it. So there felt like there were a lot of sort of barriers to entry for me and a lot of anxiety, which is something I've lived with all my life. Although at that stage, I didn't even know that that was an issue for me. And then many, many years later, when I was 40 and our son started at a local dojo, that familiarity was there because I'd taken him along and there was this comfortability that was building about being in that space. And then I just revealed to one of the other parents, I've thought about doing this myself. And he said, I do it. He said, give it a go. And oh my gosh, when your stomach just feels like it goes through the floor, all of those physiological changes, the racing heart, just at the idea that, because it's almost be careful what you wish for. I let the cat out of the bag. He's saying, here's the door, I'm opening it for you. And I did it. And I did it for the next 7 years. And it was a huge part of my life and so rewarding. But it took, I guess you could genuinely say, it took me about 20 years to get there.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. And when you talk about that example, Jodi, just so the listeners can hear what I'm thinking, is I can hear the advice you gave yourself, like, I can't do this, or what if I look stupid, or, oh my goodness, I wish I hadn't have said that I was interested. And then you talked about what you noticed, like being aware that your body just, your stomach dropped and you're like, oh no, I can't do this.
Yes.
And then from that place, it would have really been easier to stay in the comfort zone and think, no, I'm not going to try. And so to do that first step, and I bet you were really nervous the first time you went along and worried about people might laugh at you or things like that. And I think here's the thing with anxiety. We're not trying to make it sound like it's really easy, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard. But if you can find things in your life just like that one example can be the thing that you remember and hold on to when you go to do something else. So you might say, when you go to do the next thing, like maybe you go and write a book, or you've just written one, but, maybe write another book, you might say, this will be like karate. Right? And so holding all those things, understanding all those pieces can allow you to take the next step into something new and different.
Yes, and there's a really lovely saying in karate that everyone starts as a white belt. Everyone starts as a white belt, and it's something that is a quote that can be taken across any challenge that we set ourselves. Of course we do. Of course we start at the beginning. That's the only place. But it's about stepping up, isn't it? Taking that first step forward and taking our time with it as well. And each step of the way, like you were saying about noticing, but also I think when I remember those first few classes I would go and oh my goodness, the connection between the brain and the body was the challenge, that my body wouldn't do what my brain was telling me to do. And I'd leave every class exhausted from the thinking, not so much from the actual physical side of things. But so I would notice the thoughts that I would have about the experience and about the challenge that it was, how hard it was, and was I making the right decision? And then it meant leaving the family 2 nights a week, and then I'd go on a Saturday morning and all of those sorts of things. But the more I went, the more I did it, the easier it became. And that's what we know to be true, but starting is often the hardest part, isn't it?
Starting is often the hardest part, but sometimes continuing is the hardest part too. And so
Yeah.
the V part is the value part, and that's the thing I think is really interesting. It's about weighing up whether the value is greater and whether there's something in there. And the value might not be karate. The value might be doing something that's hard for you, even when your anxiety says don't do it. And so there's lots of different ways to think about what you care about and doing what matters. And so for me, I'm I'm a homebody. I want to stay home. And so, and I also have social anxiety, which people find extraordinary given the job that I'm doing and, talking publicly. But the interesting thing is that when you have something like social anxiety, more often than not, I don't want to go anywhere and I don't want to do anything. I go, and so even, going to a yoga class, I go to yoga classes and I have for that whole day of the yoga class, my mind will be going, I don't really want to go. I don't really want to go. I wish I didn't have to go. I don't really want to go. And then I go and I really enjoy the class and I come home and I think, oh, that was really nice. I really enjoyed that class today. But then the next week I'll have to go through the same process. And that's the beast about anxiety, is that for some of us, it's understanding that that is your learning history, your way of being in the world, and not expecting it to necessarily go away. And so what I mean is that I don't fight with it. So when it's yoga day and my mind is going, you don't really want to go to yoga, what excuse can you think of to not go to yoga? When my mind is doing that, I kind of just understand, oh yeah, that's just part of it. And I'll go anyway and I'll enjoy it. And so I think that's probably one of the hard pieces about anxiety. It's great if you go and do the thing that makes you anxious and after time you're not anxious. But for some people, you're going to be anxious when you do it anyway. But if you can say, well, actually, I care about this and I know I enjoy it when I do it, or I care about this and it matters to me and I feel like I'm growing and changing and being a different person, then you can do that with anxiety. And if that is more valuable, then that's the thing to do.
Yes, you remind me of when I spoke with Dr. John Forsyth, and he shared a story of a client who was finding it very difficult to venture very far at all from home. And he was a father. And the question was put to him, if the perimeter of your comfortability with travel is, say, 4 kilometres or 2 kilometres, what if one of your children was 2.5 or 4.5 kilometres, just that extra 500 metres outside of that sort of imaginary kind of comfort zone? What would you do? And the immediate answer was, well, of course, I would be there in an instant. And that just really speaks to that idea of when we can tap into what's important, that can be such a brilliant driver for us. And that's an awareness that we can develop with ourselves. How important is this? And like you say, if it's stamp collecting and it's a 0, or it's something else that we have on our hearts to achieve or do or see or experience and it's an 8 or a 9, then we've found what we need as our kind of anchor to pull us forward. Or I know that Michael Steger talks about meaning as being an anchor we kind of can throw into the future to sort of pull us forward. And yeah, I really love that quote by him. And I think that you've really helped us to really understand that way of thinking today, which is so important.
And I think the tricky thing is, inside all of that, there is no delete button from learning. Learning is all additive. It's all just adding things on. We can't delete what we've learned. And if you've spent, however many years in an environment that created anxiety, like maybe, an anxious early years or childhood or an anxious temperament that you just happen to have for whatever reason, or if things have happened to you that have made you feel more anxious, then you really can't get rid of that. But what you can do is understand it, make peace with it, and then there's no fight. And so it's the fight that's the problem. So when I was talking about my advisor saying to me, oh, you really don't want to go to yoga, what excuse can you think of to get out of it? That's my learning history and I understand it. So there's no fight with it. I'm not expecting it to go away. It might, but it might not, right? And so I'm not
Yeah.
really expecting it to, but I can let it kind of play on in the background and do what I'm going to do anyway and go, well, it can keep going, but I'm going to yoga anyway.
Yes. And you've got the skills to be able to observe what it is that you're thinking, which you can develop. And I have done an episode early on metacognition, and I'd love if before we finish up, if you could share a little tip for our listeners as to how to build that skill of being able to notice what they're thinking rather than just getting really swept away by it.
Yeah, that is a really important skill. And sometimes I think that the most important skill we have of living is awareness.
Mm.
So, awareness of our thoughts that we call giving yourself advice or your advisor, awareness of our bodies and what's going on within and without, awareness of the actions that we take, awareness of what we value. So, I think awareness is really profound. And being able to be aware of your thoughts as a tool that you can use and a tool that you can put down.
Mm.
Right? And that's the thing is, for some reason, I think in our culture, perhaps, in our culture, it seems like we have raised cognitions or thoughts to be the most important thing, you know. And somewhere along the way in our adolescent years, often, we start to really hold on to our thoughts as if they were as real as this table sitting in front of me.
Mm.
And it can be such a shock when you realise that thoughts are a passing parade. And hey, guess what? You can have a thought and you don't need to do anything about it. You don't need
Yeah.
to listen to it all the time, and you can listen to it if it's helpful.
Mm.
And so that's, to me, was just such a profound revelation. I think I was 35 or something when I thought when I discovered this, and I hope that listeners discover it much more earlier than I did. But it was a shock to me to think I can have a thought like I don't want to go to yoga and go to yoga.
Mm.
I don't actually have to do anything with the I don't want to go to yoga thought. I don't have to turn it into I really want to. I don't have to turn
Yeah.
it into a positive. I just don't have to do anything with it.
Yes.
So sometimes I work with kids who are school refusers. It's a good example. And so I was a school refuser. I left school early. So classic anxiety kind of patterns. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I work with teenagers who are refusing school. And,
Mm.
you know, when you hate school and you wake up in the morning, you'll start talking to yourself straight away. I don't want to go.
Mm.
I hate this. Why do I have to do this? It's boring. Why do they make me go? And the way we think, we can get really clever. Like if you're anxious about going to school, we can get really clever with the way we think. We can make reasons and believe them. I can't go
Mm.
because I'm sick in the stomach. I can't go because I haven't got the right shoes today. Or I can't go because I haven't done my homework. Or whatever. And once we make that reason, we can believe that reason, or we can convince ourselves that that reason is true. That's the way our thoughts work, right? We can
Yeah.
convince ourselves. So we're not lying, we believe what we've thought. And so one of the things I help kids do is to be able to practice putting one foot out of the bed and then the other, even while they've got thoughts going on like, I can't go because it's boring. And so being able to, it's really interesting to be able to move your hands and feet, even while your mind is saying something different, is a really interesting phenomenon. And I would encourage any listener to do anything, to try it and see what happens. It seems a bit weird and a bit odd, but,
Yes.
um, you know, to be able to say, stand up and say, I can't walk across the room while you're walking across the room can be sometimes the first time you realise that your thoughts are a tool. They're not commands. They don't have to be obeyed. They don't have to be
Mm.
ignored. They can just be there.
Yes. I love what you said about a passing parade. You can actually sit back and watch
Yeah,
and let them go by. And every now and again, it's almost like you jump on someone's back in the parade and you're in the parade and then you realize, oh, hang on a second, I don't want to be in the parade. I want to watch the parade. Out you come. And yeah, it's an incredible perspective to be able to take. And with practice, we can zoom ourselves out, can't we? But we
Absolutely.
have to be able to notice that we've been sort of hooked and caught up and sort of swept away in the parade versus watching it go by. And the more that we practice that, the better we get at it, don't we?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And so I think awareness is pretty much the most fundamental skill. And I'll add one other thing because I noticed that we talked about it and then we moved on, is when you're talking about your karate example, Jodi, you talked about telling someone who said, oh, yes, you can do it, you should do it. Right? And so I think that's a part of it, is the part we haven't talked about is other people and how much we really need other people and how much other people can help us. Because anxiety makes us feel afraid of other people, like of their judgment, of their evaluation, that we might not be good enough. And yet I know the people that I have worked with anxiety, if they have a friend saying, come on, you can do it, let's go, that's probably the most powerful thing. And I think it's more powerful than a psychologist, seeing a psychologist. Because to have a friend who says, come on, come with me, let's do it together.
Yeah.
Is so useful. And yet anxiety does the opposite. Anxiety makes us shy away from people in case they judge us. And sometimes it makes us distant from people. And if we can understand that that doesn't have to be like that, that we can be ourselves, warts and all, not good enough and all, and think about what we care about in terms of trying to be with other people, then that can be really helpful.
Yes, yes. And it really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Because if we go back to where our conversation started, talking about that, even though it might not look so on the outside, everyone is dealing with something, struggling with something. And so equally that we appreciate it when other people help us move forward, they appreciate it when we do too.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
We're all in this
Oh,
together.
absolutely. We really, really are. And honestly, starting the podcast, and listeners will know that I had to really bring my anxiety with me and to do the podcast, as you can well imagine. It's a big deal, putting yourself out there and creating something that's so public. And, I was learning along the journey as to how to do everything and build my skills, build my confidence. And I'm so proud of myself for doing that, because it was one of those drivers. It was one of those 8, 9, 10 out of 10. And indeed, it's another really good example. I did tell a couple of people who were huge cheerleaders and really helped me to take those steps forward. So I think when we reflect on a lot of the important things we do, the role of other people we may not have really thought about much, but we can probably all look at examples where other people have really made a huge difference for us. And so, yeah, that's a really beautiful way to finish. Louise, you have shared so generously today, and you do so in a way that just brings so much wisdom and expertise to all of us. There are so many takeaways from what we've talked about today, and I'm so grateful to you for your time and sharing your experiences and examples, and also inviting me to share some examples, because it's always nice to be asked to think differently and to apply these skills in ways that I may not have in the past. So I really appreciate that. Where can listeners find you? Can you please share with us where they can find you, the names of the books that you've published? Plus, we've got What Makes You Stronger. I say we, as if I'm on this journey with you. We've got
You are on this journey with me, Jodi. We're in it together.
Yes, indeed. That's coming out in July. Tell our listeners where they can find and connect with you.
It's very easy. louisehayes.com.au.
Oh, easy. And what I'll do is,
and on that homepage, you'll see the link to the books, and that's the easiest place to start.
amazing. What I'll do is in the show notes, which listeners can find through the podcast tab on my website or through Acast, will be particular links that you can click through straight away to access Louise's resources and to find her online. So, Louise, thank you very, very much for your time. It really has been such a pleasure to have a conversation with you, and I'm very, very grateful.
Thanks, Jodi, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.